بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والجنة للموحدين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the choicest of blessings and salutations upon our Master Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We thank Allah for allowing us to gather in His house, continuing with another class of knowledge. And we're continuing this evening, alhamdulillah, with our classes on the essentials of Islam by Habib Ahmad bin Zayd al-Habshi. And this forms part of a series that was titled How to Perform Salah from Scratch. And we've started our discussion on the arkan and elements of Salah last week, alhamdulillah. And I said that I'd like to share something inspirational before class every week. And I think the most inspirational thing for me right now is that we're in class and we have our uncle with us in the corner, Uncle Ashraf, that is here with the ventilator, but he's in the masjid. Allah grant Uncle Ashraf shifa and cure, complete shifa and cure. Ameen ya Rabbana. And if we knew how precious and valuable and important the masjid is in the eyes of Allah, we would know that a masjid is a place of shifa. And if we were to list the amount of people that entered a masjid ill and left a masjid feeling healthy, then that would be a very long list. And our mashayikh, their practice was that no matter how ill they may have been or are, they make it a point of coming to a class of knowledge. And they would say that our shifa is in these classes of knowledge. Ya Rab. But it's down to the i'tiqad in the heart. It comes down to the strength of my belief in my heart. The Prophet ﷺ told a Sahabi who came to him and said, Ya Rasulullah, my brother is very ill and he's suffering from a type of diarrhea, an itlaqul batn. So Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Isqihi asalan, give him honey to drink. So he went to his brother and gave his brother honey. And when his brother had from the honey, ma zadahu illa itlaqan, it only made matters worse. So he came back to Rasul, Ya Rasulullah, we gave him honey. And the Prophet said, Isqihi asalan, give him more honey. So him and his brother, they adopted the perception that the Prophet has spoken the truth, his shifa is in this honey. They said, Sadaqa Rasulullah wa kadhaba batnu akhi. But the belly, stomach of my brother is telling a lie. But the Prophet is truthful. So they gave him more honey until eventually he was killed. So in relation to our belief in the words of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we find cure. And he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that one of the best ways to attain cure is giving charity. Sadaqah. And one of the best types of charity to give, especially for sickness, is water. Donating water. With Uncle Zain. That's why Uncle Zain don't get sick. Allah keep him healthy. So we say that the arkan of salah are how many? Last week's how many? 13 or 17? Tamam? Actually 13, 14 or 17. The first is the niyyah. The second is takbiratul ihram. The third is standing in the prayer, compulsory prayer. Number 4, recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Number 5, the ruku'. Do me a favor, don't count the tuma'nina for now. And then you see how many we count. The ruku'. Number 6, the i'tidal, the standing after ruku'. Number 7, the 2 sajdas. Tamam? Number 8, the sitting between the sajdas. Number 9, was at-tashahhud al-akhir, the last tashahhud. Then 10, sitting in the tashahhud. 11, sending salawat upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 12, 1 salam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Wa assalamu alaikum the minimum. 13, sequence. How much is that? Some listed the arkan 13 because they didn't add tuma'nina as a rukn. They said tuma'nina is a shart in each rukn that we covered. So how many do you end up with? 13. If I add tuma'nina in ruku, i'tidal, sajdatain, and sitting between the sajdas, that's 4. So 4 plus 3 gives me 17. If I count tuma'nina in all the rukn as 1, how much does it sit with? 14. Therefore, some listed it as 30, some as 14, and some as 17. We are ever covered until the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. And today we start with ruku'. Have we been making our ruku' correctly and properly? La ilaha illallah. We come to ruku'. Of course, the way our author is listing it, he's following the method of 17. So he counts tuma'nina in each rukn. In each rukn, he counts tuma'nina as a rukn. Now, just keep that in mind as we run through these numbers. We're going to end up with 17. Number 5 is ruku'. What does ruku' mean? Ruku' means bowing down. The minimum ruku' is that you have to bow down to such an extent that you know without certainty, if I was to stretch out my hands, it will reach my knees. You understand that? Based on that description, is it a requirement for me to put my hands on my knees in my ruku'? Based on my description. Again, what is your ruku'? To bow down so much that you know with certainty, if you were to stretch out your hands will reach your knees. So placing your hands on your knees is the requirement. No, it's not a requirement. It's from the sunnah of salah, which is very important. Don't take it for granted. But in terms of my ruku' being valid, I don't have to put my hands on my knees. I just need to know that my back has bent so much that if I actually want to put my hand on my knees, I can. If my back is bent so little that I can't reach my knees, then that's not a valid ruku'. I have not bent my back enough. Tamam? Everyone understands that? However, the preferred way of performing ruku' is that your back should be straight. Your back should be straight. And your legs should be fully erected. Your legs should not be bent. And you should place your hands on your knees. And your knees should not be together, but they should be apart. They should be apart. And your fingers, when you place it down on your knees, should be not open moderately. So when you're speaking about how your hand should be in salah, that is closed, that is wide, that's moderate. Slightly open. That's how your hand should be on your knees. However, the minimum ruku is that your back should be bent so much that if you wanted to place your hand on your knees, that your hands would reach your knees. If your back is not bent enough such that your hands cannot reach your knees, that's not a valid ruku. Idris, why are you sitting at the back? Bismillah. Hey? Yeah. You're a young man. What's wrong with the back? From what? What's he saying? Yesterday. Okay, you sort him out there. He's my nephew. If you're wondering why I'm... Tamam. Another condition of ruku is that when you go down into ruku, you must go down with an intention of ruku. If you go down, if a person decides he wants to make sajda to tilawah, what is sajda to tilawah? You read the verse in the Quran of sajda. So now he wants to go make sajda. And then he goes down and he reaches the position of his ruku, then he changes his mind. Okay, I'm not going to make sajda. I am here in ruku, let me make ruku. That's not a valid ruku. Because he didn't go down from his standing position with the intention of ruku. So you have to drop with an intention of ruku. A person, his money dropped and the wind is blowing, so you want to grab it before it blows away, and he bends down to pick up his money, and then he comes up and then he stays in the position of ruku. That's not a valid ruku. He did not go down with an intention of ruku. No. So when you go down, it must be ruku. You must stand up again and then go down again for a second time with the intention of ruku. That's your ruku. The next rukun he lists as number 6 is that you must have tuma'nina in the ruku. And I've explained previously that what tuma'nina means is that your limbs should come to rest. And that can usually be achieved with the time it takes to recite Subhanallah. You know what your limb coming to rest? I'm speaking now. Just look how my limbs come to rest. That's my limbs coming to rest. Right? You saw that, right? Those who weren't looking, look at it again. So that's tumanina. Your limbs must come to rest. The 7th rukn is al-i'tidal. And i'tidal is standing up after the ruku. When the person who was bowing down now returns back to a standing position. And the condition is that you need to stand up from your ruku with an intention of going into i'tidal. If you are in ruku and a cockroach ran in front of you, so you jumped up, and now you decide I'm going to be in i'tidal, that does not suffice, because you did not come up with an intention of i'tidal. Everyone with me? Now, then there's a debate among the early scholars and later scholars. Is the i'tidal a short rukn or a long rukn? That discussion is not important for us right now. Many of the latter scholars, they just consider it to be a lengthy rukn, and thus a lot of the detail that they would discuss here becomes unnecessary. No. Number 8 is you must have tuma'nina in your i'tidal. Number 9 is the 2 sajdas. So what sajda means, what the sajda means, and the definition tells you what the shurut of a sajda is, that you need to place 7 body parts on the ground. 7 body parts on the ground. What 7 body parts? Your forehead, your jabha. No. Should your nose be on the ground? Yes. Is it a requirement? Preferable, but it's not a requirement. That's how come the Shafi'is, when you're wearing a mask in Salah, we had no issue wearing a mask in Salah because your forehead touches the ground, and the fact that there's a mask covering your nose, there was no problem with it. The sajda is valid. However, the condition of the forehead, unlike any other body part, the forehead must be uncovered. If a person's kufiya is covering his forehead, or a lady's scarf is covering her forehead, and she makes sajda while her forehead is covered or his forehead is covered, then that sajda is not valid. Your forehead must be open.
So
your skin of the forehead must touch the ground. What's the question? A portion of the skin. So you could actually have a small gap here if you really want to be funny. And if a portion of the forehead touches it, it suffices. They say juz'un, a part of the jabha. And therefore a lady in the Shafi'i school cannot pray salah with niqab. If she's wearing niqab, her forehead is covered. If her forehead is covered when she's making salah, then the salah is not valid. Right? So your forehead must be open. What other body parts must be on the ground? Hands. What do you mean by hands? The palm of the fingers. Right? Or both. Either the palm or ideally both. But what is wajib is either the palm or the fingers. If a person just uses his fingers, it suffices. If he just uses his palms, it suffices. But of course, the best is to place both the palm and the fingers down. Now, so either part of your fingers need to be on the ground or part of the palm. That counts as two. Forehead, so the palms or the hands, whether it's the inside of your fingers, meaning the bottom side, or your palm. That's 3. Then your knees. Of course, your knees is going to be covered. Can you make salah with gloves? You make salah with gloves. It depends how cold it is. You can make salah with gloves. Salah will be valid. It's only the skin of the forehead that needs to touch. If your feet doesn't touch the skin of your feet or your hands doesn't touch the ground, it's not a problem. But some scholars did say it's this light for your hands to be covered, but they all agree your salah will be valid. Your sajda is valid and your salah will be valid. Now, then he said that the other, so it's your forehead, your hands, your knees, and then the butunu asabi rijlayhi. Not your feet, not your toes, the inside of your toes. Which means your toes must be bent. You understand that? If a person places the tip of his toes like that on the ground, it's a problem. There must be a slight bend such that part of the inside of at least some of his toes is touching the ground for his sajda to be valid. Do you get that? And the more you can bend your toes, the closer you are to the sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The closer you are to the sunnah. In fact, Naam, Bismillah. Go for it.
Yes, let's do that one. For instance, with me, I had a problem with my ankle. Because I've got screws.
Yes.
So to bend my toes, is it considered both feet or what?
Now, both feet. I also have screws in my ankles.
But I can hardly bend them.
You just have to bend them so much. Like literally, if you put your toes straight down and you have a slight bend, that suffices. And if you really can't do that, then you would be excused. But as long as it's possible for you to bend them even slightly, that a part of the inside of your toes are actually touching the ground, then that is preferred. Now, if you really can't, then it's impossible, then لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not make a person duty bound with that which he cannot or she cannot do. No. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
No. Allah. So the inside of your hands and feet. Other conditions of the sujood is that when you place your forehead on the ground, there has to be some pressure that you're placing on the ground. You don't have to knock your head. But if I put a piece of cotton on the ground or tissue paper and you place your forehead, there needs to be so much that it creates some type of indentation within the cotton. There must be some pressure applied when you're placing your forehead on the ground. Other condition is your buttocks area must be higher than your head. Let's say your bottom part must be higher than your front part, meaning the buttocks area has to be higher than your head. If I'm making salah on a hill, slope, so I make sajda and my top part of my body is higher and my bottom part of my body is lower, that's not a valid sajda. It must be such that my buttocks when I'm down has to be higher than my head. Everyone gets that, right? It's not difficult to understand. And you must know with certainty that your buttocks is actually higher than they say your head and your shoulders. Than your head and your shoulders. The third condition of so what did we mention now? Your head must be firmly placed on the ground. There has to be some pressure. Number 2 is your lower part, buttocks area must be higher than your head and shoulders. These are conditions for your sajda to be valid. Number 3 is that you must prostrate on 7 limbs. We covered that. Number 4 is your forehead must be exposed, mustn't be covered. We covered that. Now, then number 5 is you shouldn't prostrate upon anything that is moving with your body. For example, Muhammad Noor is wearing a nice shawl. Can everyone see it here, the black shawl? Sorry, the camera people, the online students can't see the shawl. He's wearing a nice shawl. If he goes into sajda, that shawl moves with his body. Wherever he moves, the shawl moves with him. If he goes into sajda and his shawl opens up in front of him and then he places his forehead on his shawl, then it's almost as if his forehead is covered and his sajda won't be valid. You get that? If he take his shawl off and throw it on the ground, such that the shawl doesn't move with his body any longer, and now he makes sajda on the shawl, no problem. But if it's tied onto his body and moves with his body, and then he goes into sajda and he makes sajda on his shawl that is moving with his body, then his salah is not. Or someone's turban, someone wearing a big turban, and he goes down and the turban swings to the front and he makes sajda on his turban. Salah is not, the sajda is not valid, and accordingly, the salah won't be valid. Now, number 6 is, you must not go down into sajda with any other intention besides sajda. If he lost his balance and fell to the ground, so now I want to cover up for his fall, so Islam is making sajda, not valid. Must stand up again and go down with an intention of sajda. Now, that's the 6 shurut of your sajda. That was number 9. Number 10 is at-tuma'nina, having tuma'nina in your sajda. Number 11 is the sitting between the 2 sajdas. And there also is a discussion, is it a rukn tawil, a lengthy rukn or a short rukn? And now the position that many of the scholars have adopted is like it's a rukn like any other rukn. So the detailed discussions that comes over there, there's no need for me to share it with you. The sitting between the 2 sajdas. Number 12 is you must have tuma'nina in that sitting. These positions we're coming back to it again. Why must I come back to it? Because we need to discuss how should you be sitting in that sitting between the sajdas. Even tashahud, how should you be sitting in your tashahud? There's other aspects such as whether you raise your hands in making takbir or not raise. All of those things will be discussed maybe later today or in our next dars, because we are focused now just on the arkan, what I must do in order for my salah to be valid. It doesn't make sense for me to be memorizing the qunut of Fajr now if I don't know if my sajda is valid or not valid. Right? The arkan, 17 arkan, we must know them well. So the 12 was you must have tuma'nina in the sitting between the sajda. Number 13 is the last tashahhud, meaning that the first tashahhud is not a rukn. In my maghrib salah and my isha salah, and my dhuhr and my asr, where we have 2 tashahhuds, the first is not a rukn, only the last tashahhud is a rukn. Meaning if I left out the first tashahhud, my salah is still valid. Right? As only if I leave out the rukn that my salah becomes invalid. Otherwise my salah is valid. Now the tashahhud is called the tashahhud because it consists of the shahadatain. The last sitting in salah is called tashahhud because it consists of ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And like the Fatiha, the tashahhud must be recited in Arabic. And if you don't know it, you must memorize it. And if there's no more time left, then you pray the salah without having memorized the tashahhud, and then you may translate it into some other language in order for you to complete that salah. But then before you make your next salah, you have to memorize the tashahhud. The tashahhud, the scholars are very strict about it. Now, so by way of example, the conditions of the Fatiha apply to the tashahhud. Even the shaddas in your tashahhud has to be pronounced correctly as how the shaddas must be pronounced correctly in your Fatiha. Abdullah was a Sahabi. I think Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he said the Prophet used to teach us the tashahhud as how he would teach us a surah in the Quran. Now, the minimum tashahhud is to recite at-tahiyyatu lillah. Salamun alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salamun alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Now, one of the great scholars in the Shafi'i school, he actually said that if you just say Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, it does not suffice. He said you must add wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. And therefore the safer option is to read it Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. However, other scholars in the madhab said you read Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah without abdu wa rasul, that suffices. Ramlan ibn Hajar debated about it. Allah. The complete tashahhud we're going to cover in due time. Now, so strict they are with the tashahhud and the pronouncement of every shadda, that if a person reads Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu, so you suppose there's a shadda there, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Muhammadan is a tanween, and when a ra comes after a tanween, that's idgham. If you study tajweed, they call that idgham. Yarmalun. Right? So you have idgham with ghunna and idgham without ghunna. So that's what they call idgham. If a person reads wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah and he doesn't read the shadda of Muhammadan Rasulullah, then his tashahhud is not correct. And he must repeat it. And if he doesn't repeat it, his salah is not valid. Ajib. The same goes with the Ashhadu an la ilaha. That's a shadda. The noon goes into the lam, so you don't say Ashhadu an la ilaha. You read Ashhadu an la ilaha. If you don't join it, you say an la ilaha. The tashahhud is not correct. Subhanallah. The 14th rukn is you must sit when doing your tashahhud, like you need to stand when reciting your Fatiha. If you are capable of sitting, a person who can't sit, he can stand and read his tashahhud, like a person who can't stand can sit and read Surah Fatiha. Number 15 is sending salutations upon the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the tashahhud al-akhir. Subhanallah. Sending salawat upon the Prophet in salah is wajib. Without it, your salah is invalid. But the salat, the first condition is your salat ala Rasul, salutations upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It must be after your tashahhud. You can't do it before your tashahhud. If a person says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, at-tahiyyatul mubarakatul salawat, salah is not valid. The salawat must come after. No. That's the only place where salawat upon Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is wajib, in your tashahhud al-akhir in your salah. No. The minimum salawat is you can say sallallahu ala Muhammad or sallallahu ala Rasulih or sallallahu ala Nabi. But the preferred salawat, of course, is to say the salawat Ibrahimiyya. And we're going to discuss that in a moment. Now, and the Prophet ﷺ did not teach his Sahaba to add Sayyidina in the salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That's how the Prophet told them. They said it's recommended to add Sayyidina before the name of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Number 16 is to greet at the end of your salah. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said the opening of your salah, the key to your salah is cleanliness. وَتَحْرِيمُهَا التَّكْبِيرُ. You enter into your salah by pronouncing Allahu Akbar. وَتَحْلِيلُهَا التَّسْلِيمُ. And you leave your salah by saying Assalamu alaikum. So the minimum is to say once to your right, Assalamu alaikum. And with that you leave salah. Even though it's preferred to add wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Then the salam at the end of your salah has 11 conditions in order for it to be valid. So it sounds complicated, but it doesn't have to be. If you just learn Assalamu alaikum, then you got it right. But what other condition? I'll go through some of them quickly. You must say Assalam with the lam ta'arif at the beginning. You can't say Salamun alaikum. No. It's not a valid salam. And if it's not a valid salam, you have not fulfilled the rukn. If you have not fulfilled the rukn, your salah is not valid. You must say Assalamu alaikum. Now, you must use the kum. Peace be upon you all. You can't say Assalamu alayhi or Assalamu alayhim. You must say Assalamu alaykum. And then also you must have the two words must be pronounced after each other. Assalamu alaikum. You can't say Assalam and then pause for a while. Alaikum. No. You can't say Assalamu alayka. You must say Assalamu alaykum. While pronouncing the taslim, your chest must face Qibla. The person says Assalamu alaikum. He says Assalamu alaikum while his chest was not facing Qibla. His taslim was not valid. His salah is not valid. But to turn your head to the side in greeting is from the Sunnah of Rasulullah without turning your chest. Another condition is you must say Assalamu alaikum. And if you wish to add wa rahmatullah while seated, you can't stand up and then say Assalamu alaikum. Another condition is you must hear yourself. It has to be so audible that you can hear what you're reciting. And it has to be in Arabic. And then the 17th rukn is tartib. There must be sequence. You must follow that exact sequence. You can't change up the sequence of salah, because Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said that sallu, pray your salah kama ra'aytumuni usalli, as how you have seen me pray. And that is the 17 arkan of salah. Is that clear to everyone? No questions, right? We can run through it again. The niyyah, takbiratul ihram, al-qiyam, standing in the fard salah, surah al-fatiha, al-ruku, tuma'nina in ruku, al-i'tidal, tuma'nina in i'tidal, sajdatain, tuma'nina in the sajdatain, al-julus bayna sajdatain, tuma'nina in the sajdatain, al-tashahhud al-akhir, sitting in the tashahhud al-akhir, salawat upon Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and then greeting, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and sequence tartib. Tamam? No questions on that. We need to move on. I just want to make sure everyone got that. Now, come on. When in sujood. Now, someone who puts his elbows on the floor while making sajda, his sajda is valid. His sajda is valid if the 7 body parts are on the ground. But a male should not put his arms on the ground when making sajda. The correct way of making sajda, we're going to come to that in due time, inshallah. But the sajda will be valid if the 7 body parts are on the ground for the duration of tuma'nina. No other questions? We see what's happening here. So here's a question coming from one of our online students. It's in relation to following her husband who is a Hanafi in Salah and the recitation of Surah Fatiha. I'm going to come back to that. Here's a question. I'm going to come back to all the questions online. I'm going to try to come back to them at least. I just was browsing through to see what relates to the Arkan of Salah. So here's a question that relates to the Arkan of Salah. A person, he is making salah and then his kufiya falls off his head. That happens, right? He goes into ruku, his kufiya falls off. But some of our young brothers, the kufiyas are always falling off. Now his kufiya is on the ground. If he makes sajda on his kufiya, will his sajda be valid? If he places his forehead on the kufiya, will his? Yes. Why? Because not moving with his body. But if the kufiya was tied on his head over his forehead and it's moving with his body wherever he goes, and now he makes sajda on it, it won't be that. No. Can we go on? We're now going to look at the sunnah of Salah. Habib Ahmad bin Zain al-Habshi in the Risala Jamia, in his book, he said that you should place great caution to practice upon all the sunnahs of Salah. Tamam? And the sunnah of Salah is divided into 3 categories. What do you think the 3 categories are? Where was I reading? The first category are sunnah that you're supposed to do before making salah, which forms part of the sunnah. The word sunnah, sometimes, you know, someone was telling me that the class sometimes gets in too much detail for some of our new Muslim brothers and sisters. And I apologize for that. One brother was telling me that, his wife to be is a new Muslim. And, some of the discussions, the detail. So I said, I understand that, but don't blame me. You must blame the brothers that are sitting with me in the masjid. So there are sunnahs before salah. What are the sunnah of salah that comes before salah? Right? Now that's a sunnah salah. Perhaps iqamah. That's one sunnah. What else? There's a list of things that could come up over here. A list of things. From the first sunnah is when you leave home to read the dua when leaving for the masjid. That we spoke of in our first class or second class. And by now, my good thought of everyone present is that everyone has memorized the dua when leaving home for the masjid. Am I right? I mean, right? Then from the sunnah before salah, when you enter the masjid, what do you recite when you enter the masjid? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Allahumma ighfir li dhunubi wa aftah li abwaba rahmatik. And when you leave, it's the same, except that you say wa aftah li abwaba fadlik. Dua when entering and leaving the masjid. Praying 2 rak'ats or 4 rak'at before the waqt. Those are all from the sunnah. From the important sunnah that our community, we only practice it when it comes to the masjid, is calling the adhan. But even if I'm praying salah at home, it's still sunnah to call out the adhan. A common question I get asked, I might as well ask it now before somebody asks it. What if I can hear the adhan coming from the masjid? Must I still call the adhan in my home? What's the answer to that question? Hey? You must go to the masjid. So what? Do you make the adhan or do you not make the adhan? It depends. When the muaddin called you from the masjid and your intention was to go to the masjid, and then for some reason or the other you end up not going, then that adhan counts for you. But when the adhan go and you had no intention of going to the masjid, then it's still sunnah for you to make adhan at home. Which is the case most of the time for most people who are not praying salah regularly in the masjid. So before salah, even at home, it's still sunnah to call the adhan. Right? The only time we really call the adhan in our homes is someone go for hajj. Otherwise, whenever I make salah, whenever I make it at home, the sunnah is to call out the adhan. And then of course the sunnah salah and the iqamah, those are sunnahs before the salah starts. Then there are sunnahs inside of salah, and then there is sunnah after the salah. What we're going to focus on now is the sunnah. Again, I forget, I want to put things. What we mean by the word sunnah, it's a plural of sunnah. What we mean by sunnah, especially in this context here when we're discussing fiqh, is something, if you do it, you'll be rewarded. And if you leave it out, you will not be punished. However, when it comes to the sunnahs inside of salah, the scholars divided them into two. They were called ab'ad and they were called hayat. And the difference between the two, and the reason why they gave them these names, is to distinguish between the two of them. The ab'ad are such sunan, when you leave them out, it brings about a deficiency in your salah that can be made up with sajdatul tilawah. Not sajdatul tilawah, sajdatul sahwi. It can be made up with sujoodul sahwi at the end of the salah. Everyone gets that? Now, some of us may not have heard of sujoodul sahwi before. To give you a quick example, your qunut in Salatul Fajr, that falls under the category of ab'ad. When you leave out your qunut, There's a deficiency in your salah. You can make up for that deficiency by making sujood sahwi. Sujood sahwi means at the end of my salah, before I say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, I make 2 sajdas of sahwi. Sahwi means there was a slip up, an error, a deficiency in my prayer. Now, some of us may have witnessed sahwi, some of us may have not. No, but that's what sujood sahwi. So, ab'ad, such sunnahs, if I leave them out, I make sujood sahwi at the end. Hayat or such sunnahs, if I leave them out, I don't perform any sujood sahwi at the end. What are the sunnahs in salah? The first is to raise your hands when you're pronouncing Allahu Akbar. The first one is when you're making takbiratul ihram. How do you raise your hands? Your hands should be in line with the shoulders, right? You basically get your bearings in line with the shoulders. Your thumb must be in line with your earlobes at the bottom. And the rest of your fingers in line with your ears. They're slightly separated and slightly arched to the front, as I'm showing you now. So that's in line with my earlobes. You don't touch your earlobes, right? Some thought that takbir is all about earlobes. Some people do this. I don't know if you see it. I've seen it. They just heard something about earlobes. So it must be in line. You don't touch it. It must be in line. The rest of your fingers in line with your ears and slightly arched. Allahu Akbar. Okay? That's the first one. Raising your hands. But you don't only raise your hands when you make takbiratul ihram. You raise your hands when you go into ruku. When I say Allahu Akbar, when I'm going to ruku, I raise my hands again. And when I come up from ruku, I raise my hands again. In the Hanafi school, they don't raise their hands when they come up from ruku. But as far as we are concerned, the hadith that speaks about ruku, raising your hands and coming up from ruku, are countless. That says the Prophet ﷺ, when he came up from ruku, used to raise his hands. Now, also, where else do you raise your hands? When you come up into what rak'ah? Your third rak'ah, not your second. When you're done with your tashahhud and you're coming up into your third rak'ah, you also raise your hands. Everyone has that. Then from the sunan of salah is you recite your du'a'ul istiftah. Du'a'ul istiftah. I was actually two-minded whether I should dedicate the time in this class for the du'as that you must read in salah, that everyone must memorize. Right? You should consider it wajib upon yourself to memorize these du'as. Whether I should do that or whether I should just focus on the du'as, like the entire rest of the stuff, just focus on du'as, or whether we actually go following all the sunnahs of salah one by one. Right? Maybe we should just do a mixture of them all. So the du'a al-istiftah is what? There are three parts to the du'a al-istiftah. They come in different narrations. And the Imam Shafi joined between all of them. What is the du'a al-istiftah? There's a this is where I said we're going to be reading from the Dakhir al-Musharraf. The Dakhir al-Musharraf of Sayyid Habib Umar is what our children should be taught in afternoon madrasa. And we have a translation of that we're releasing very soon, inshallah. But what is the du'a al-iftitah? After you said Allahu Akbar, to recite Allahu Akbar kabira, walhamdulillahi kathira, wa subhanallahi bukrata wa asila. That's the first part. The second part is wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi fatara as-samawati wal arda hanifan musliman wa ma ana minal mushrikeen. That's the second part. The last part is Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alamin. You know what's the amazing thing about these du'as? Some of them is that they are all proof to show you that the Sahaba sometimes they did certain actions even in their salah that the Prophet ﷺ did not legislate. It was what our scholars refer to as good innovation. Listen to this. Listen to this. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala narrates that we were praying salah with Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Prophet entered salah, Allahu Akbar. And the Sahaba behind the Prophet, Allahu Akbar. And then one Sahabi, he recited to himself, but the Prophet could hear him. What did he read? Allahu Akbar kabira. Walhamdulillahi kathira. Wa subhanallahi bukrata wa asila. So the Prophet concluded the salah. And then after the salah, the Prophet did, who recited that dua? Man al-qa'il kada wa kada. So they said, the man, the Sahabi who recited, he said, it was me, Ya Rasul. If doing something that the Prophet ﷺ did not do was an innovation, a bad innovation that takes you to the fire of Jahannam, then it's compulsory upon the Prophet to tell that Sahabi, there and there, you don't do anything that I did not teach you. But the Prophet ﷺ didn't do that. What did the Prophet ﷺ say to him? The Prophet ﷺ said, I was amazed with what you recited. When you recited it, the doors of Jannah opened. I was amazed with what you recited. When you recited it, the doors of Jannah opened. Ajibtu laha futihat laha abwabu sama, or the doors of the heavens opened for you. Subhanallah. Now, and then so I said these three parts. Allah Akbar Kabir, Alhamdulillah Kathira, Subhanallah, Bukratan, Wasila. And then Wajjahtu Wajhiya, the last was Inna Salati wa Nusuki. I'm going to translate it in a moment because there are beautiful meanings therein. But if you're going to restrict yourself to one of those three parts, then the middle part is best. What is the middle part? Wajjahtu Wajhiya lilladhi fatara samawati. Now, even though it's better for you to recite all. The dua al-istiftah is sunnah before all salahs. Farad salah, sunnah salah. But it's not sunnah to recite it in your salatul janazah. Salatul janazah, there's no dua al-istiftah. Then also one needs to be particular not to say, in the Quran, it comes, Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya la sharika lahu wa bidhalika umirtu wa ana awwalul muslimin. One should be cautious not to say wa ana awwalul muslimin. No. If a person says wa ana awwalul muslimin, which translated I am the first of the Muslims, and he does so with an intention, believing that he is the first of the Muslims, then he leaves the fold of Islam. Because if you believe you're the first Muslim, what about everyone else? No. So look how beautiful this dua is. Allahu Akbar Kabira. Allah is the greatest. Kabira is emphasizing Allah's greatness. Walhamdulillahi Kathira, abundant, Kathira, praises are for Allah. Wa subhanallah, glory be to Allah. Bukratan wa asila, in the mornings and the evenings. Wajjahtu wajhiya, I direct my face. When you direct your face, it means I direct my entirety to whom? To Allah. Wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi, to the one fatara samawati wal ard, who created the heavens and the earth. Hanifan, inclined towards this deen, Musliman and Muslim. Wama ana min al-mushrikeen, I am not from the idolaters. Inna salati, indeed my salah. The praise of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam are so beautiful. And He did it for you and I. He taught these prayers to you and I. Inna salati, indeed my salah. Wa nusuki. Nusuk can refer to your Hajj rituals, or they can refer to rituals in general. Indeed my prayer, my rituals, wa nusuki. Wa mahyaya wa mamati, my life and my death. Lillahi Rabbil Alameen, is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the world. La sharika lahu, he is no partner for Allah. وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ, that I was commanded, وَأَنَا مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, and I am from the Muslims. Just imagine your frame of mind when you entered into Salah. Every Salah. Already the takbir alone, some of the scholars say the reason why you make takbir is because when you do this action in your mind, you should be telling yourself that I'm now throwing everything behind me. And I'm going to turn and direct myself to Allah. This is the closest I can be to my Lord. This is my mi'raj. This is how I communicate with Allah. And then to further emphasize that, وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِيَ لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ حَنِيفًا مُسْلِمًا وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. This is a prayer that our children should memorize. Tamam. So that's to our istiftah. The next sunnah is to recite the ta'awudh. What is the ta'awudh? To read A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem before my Fatiha. To recite A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem before the Fatiha. No. How many people read the A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem? Abid Razin says that. The only thing is, it's sunnah to recite the ta'awudh, because Allah said, فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. But the ta'awudh, the أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ in your salah should not be recited aloud. It should be recited soft, silently. In case you're thinking the Imam don't do it, we do it silently. If a person starts Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, then he remembers, hey, I never recited A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem, you can't go back. No. And then A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem, you don't only read it in your first raka'ah, but in every raka'ah before the Fatiha, it's sunnah to read A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem. And then he said, وَقِرَاءَةُ سُورَةٍ. It's also sunnah in your, to recite a surah of the Quran after the Fatiha. Like we do. We'll do it now in the first two rakats of Isha. We'll do it again. We did it for Maghrib. To recite a surah of the Quran. The person that is following the Imam should not recite the surah if he hears the Imam. Allah said in the Quran that وَإِذَا قُرِّئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا, then listen and be quiet. But if you're far away from the Imam and you cannot hear the Imam reciting a surah of the Quran after the Fatiha, then it's sunnah for you to recite the surah as well. Now, what about your 2 rak'ats of Dhuhr and Asr? You recite the surah, yes or no? If you're standing so close to the Imam that you can hear the Imam reading, then you don't read the surah. But usually you can't hear the Imam reading, in which case it's sunnah to recite a surah in a silent prayer when you can't hear the Imam reading. What about teachers Mullah Ibrahim Ghafoor? Even in his silent salah you can hear him, especially if he's reading with a microphone. I think, but hear yourself, yes. Hearing yourself doesn't. No, the other Imams reading in there. No. So you recite the surah of the Quran after the Fatiha in the 2 rak'ats of Fajr, the first 2 rak'ats of Dhuhr, the first 2 rak'ats of Asr, the first 2 rak'ats of Maghrib, and the first 2 of Isha. The Prophet ﷺ is reading in his Salatul Dhuhr used to be long. He used to read lengthy surahs in his Salatul Dhuhr, even though it was a silent prayer. And then he said that surah a person should recite aloud in the Fajr prayer, that's Sunnah, to recite aloud in the first 2 rak'ats of Maghrib and Isha, as well as in Salatul Jumu'ah and Salatul Eidain and Istisqa and Salatul Khusuf, the prayer of eclipse, and in the prayer of Taraweeh, and in the Salatul Witr during the month of Ramadan. Those are the prayers we recite aloud. As for the follower of an Imam, it's never recommended for him to recite aloud. He must always recite silently. And it's recommended for a male to recite aloud and a female, but it's only recommended for a female to recite aloud in prayer when there are no strange men close by. Now, if she knows that there are men close by listening to her and she recites aloud, it's makruh for her to do so. And with that, you know what the ruling is for a lady to recite the Quran in front of strange men, and for her to recite the Quran or in a sheet over the radio. Now, then in terms of the other sunnah of Salah, you place your right hand over your on the wrist of your left hand, and you do so below the chest, above the navel. So this is my right hand over my left hand, over the wrist of my left hand. I hold it like this, and I can't see. This is how you're holding it on the camera, right? And you placed it below your chest, above your knee. There's a detailed discussion. Where should you place your hand? I don't know. So the madhaib, the 4 schools of thought, their views is generally between below the chest, above the navel. And then you have like the Hanafis who says below the navel. You see the Hanafis, they place their hand below the navel. And in this era we're living now, one scholar came across a hadith in the Sahih of Ibn Khuzaymah, where it is related that the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr, where the Prophet ﷺ placed his hands on his chest. That's what the hadith says, ala sadr. And if you find people that read this hadith, imagining that they discovered something that none of the scholars discovered in the past, they pray doing this, placing their hands on the chest. No, we'll come to that in a moment. So placing the hands on the chest, they do this. However, that's an incorrect reading of the hadith. Because the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr has been transmitted by, there are various chains of transmission for that same hadith. And the same hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr, some of them said it was on the chest, and others say that he placed his hand below his navel. Therefore, Shaykh Muhammad Awama, in his Tahqiq of the Musannaf Ibn Abi Shaybah, has a lengthy discussion. I don't want to get into the details over there now. I just want you to know that if you stick to what your mother has been saying, there's very, very strong foundations and support for what the Madhab have been saying over the centuries. It's getting late. So, below the chest, above the navel. If you really want to see detail, I will show you. I had our students work on this hadith at the madrasa many years ago. All the turuq and the mutaba'at and the shawahid, not the shawahid, the turuq and the mutaba'at of this hadith. One, and where it appears a few times in Sahih Ibn Zaymah and the Musannaf Ibn Abi Shaybah and many different sources, And you will see, I'll show you how the version that says on the chest is wrong. I'll show you how it's wrong. And the person that adopted that view based on that hadith, they, first of all, they have a disregard for the madhahib al-arba on one hand. The same hadith also says the Prophet used to move his finger in salah, at the end in his tashahhud. And that version is also wrong. And if you have time, I will sit to and I will show you how the version that says he moved his finger is wrong. In such a way that there will be no doubt. But I can't get into that discussion. Now, then he said that to pronounce Allahu Akbar in all your movement, whenever you're moving from one posture to another, from the sunnah. Remember, all these things that you are already familiar with, I'm mentioning it now, but you should now know that it is at sunnah. These are not, does not form part of the arkan of salah. So when do you recite Allahu Akbar? From you sitting into your ruku, Allahu Akbar. But when coming up from your ruku, you don't say Allahu Akbar, you recite Sami Allahu liman hamidah. And then what do you recite after Sami Allahu liman hamidah? Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Here's another example of a bidah hasana. Listen to this one. The Prophet ﷺ is making salah. And the Prophet comes up from ruku, Rasul ﷺ says, Sami Allahu liman hamidah. Allah hears the one who praises him. A Sahabi behind Rasul ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ never taught him this. The Prophet never told him to do this. He says, Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fi. The Prophet finishes the salah. The Prophet says, who made the dua? Who pronounced those praises? The Sahaba said, it was me, Ya Rasul. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, I saw 30 odd angels coming down to collect that praise of yours, hastening who's going to take it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hastening. If it was impermissible for him to create his own dua, that the Prophet did not teach him, then it would have been wajib for the Prophet to tell him, don't do it. You only do what the Prophet didn't only approve of what he did. Rasul Sallallahu told him, I saw Bukhari narrates, I saw between 33 and 39. Bid'ah is a number between 3 and 9. I saw 30 odd angels hastening, vying, competing with each other. Who can receive that praise of yours to take it to Allah? The Prophet said, he said, Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Oh Allah, to you belongs praise. Hamdan, a praise. Kathiran, abundant. Tayyiban, blessed. Mubarakan fi. Wholesome and mubarakan fi, blessed. Now, but what the Prophet also taught us to recite after, the Prophet then began reading that dua. But the Prophet added to it. The Prophet added, Mil as-samawati wa mil al-ardi wa mil ma shi'ta min shay'in ba'd. O Allah, to you belongs all praise, wholesome and blessed. And then he said, Mil a praise that fills the heavens, wa mil al-ardi, that fills the land, wa mil ma shi'ta, and fills whatever you desire, Allah, thereafter. Don't you want to praise Allah like that in your salah? These are du'as that you must come up from your ruku, the man says, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fi mil as-samawati wa mil al-ardi wa mil ma shi'ta min shay'in ba'd ahla ath-thana'i wal majdi ahaqqu ma qala al-'abdu wa kulluna laka 'abd Allahumma la mani'a lima atayt wa la mu'tiya lima manat wa la radda lima qadayt wa la yanfa'u dhal-jaddi bika. No. So these are all du'as established from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you memorize them once, you have it with you to recite for the rest of your life. You have it with you to recite it for the rest of your life. What time is Isha? I know it's Isha. I just want to know how long after Isha are we? We must end it. So we're going to continue with the Sunnah of Salah. But these are not things that we should take lightly. This is how I enhance my Salah. This is how I adorn my Salah. This is how I beautify my Salah that is going to my Creator Allah. The least of these practices I have in my Salah, the less my Salah is adorned. And I continue taking away from my Salah and taking away from my Salah. The Prophet ﷺ told us, some people, they perform Salah, their Salah that they've done, so little presence of heart, so little meaning, so little prayers, so little Sunnah. When that Salah reaches Allah, it reaches Allah like a dirty rag. So Allah takes that dirty rag and throws it right back. What's the quality of my Salah? These Sunnahs with Arkan, we must know them, but my Salah must be valid. If my Salah is not valid, I'm in trouble. But this is how I beautify my Salah that I'm sending to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're going to continue with this next week, inshaAllah ta'ala. Next week is all about the dawning of Salah. Are there any questions before we conclude? Kutas all told me it's 30 minutes all the time. No? No. The best place to recite it is after the Imam recited the Fatiha. So Imam concludes, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ Amin. The Imam usually gives you some time and then you recite the Fatiha. If the Imam doesn't give you time, like Taraweeh, or like the assistant asked the question, say the husband is a Hanafi, he recites the Fatiha and he goes on, he doesn't give time for her to recite, then there is a view that allows you to recite the Fatiha with the Imam. Silently, the Imam recites the Fatiha, read with him. And that's a good view to practice in the Taraweeh Salah. Some people, they stand with the Quran, they want to follow the whole Khatam. But when the Hafiz is done with Fatiha, he must bacha Fatiha, and then he comes to the Quran, depending on what masjid you're in, they may be in ruku already. So, you can, like Tarawih is a good time, read the Fatiha with the Imam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said that there is no Salah without Surah Fatiha. So you have to recite Surah Fatiha. That answers the question that came here. No. Anyone else?
One asking about praying on a chair. What is the procedure? What is the best way to do that? The other one is asking about the raising of hands.
No. So a female doesn't raise her hands as how a male raises her hands. She raises her hands in such a way. Her salah is based more on modesty. More on modesty. And she keeps herself together. And from the way of a female, she raises her hands such that it doesn't go beyond her shoulders. So she raises it low. Exactly how, I must double check. But I know she doesn't raise it above the shoulder. She raises it to the front of her body. And praying salah on a chair, we covered this. If the musalli or seniors or use the chair when praying salah, if they're able to stand, they should stand. If they're able to stand for part, then they ideally should stand for part. And if it's difficult for them to stand altogether, then they may be seated. Another option, if the standing makes things complicated, they could adopt the Hanafi school and just sit. Because sometimes, if you tell our seniors that you must stand for as much as you can, and then you may sit, where do they draw a line? When is it enough? When is it difficult? When am I harming myself? When is there difficulty? Right? So it can become a bit complicated. The best would be to push through and try to stand for the whole rak'ah. But if our seniors wish to adopt the Hanafi school and accordingly sit, even though they could stand for a portion or part or for some rak'ah, then they may do so if it brings about ease in their salah that they make. But someone who wants to follow the Shafi school needs to know that he must try his best to stand as far as possible where it is possible for him to do so. As for his sajda and ruku, if he's able to make ruku normally and sajda normally, then the person who prays on the chair should make sajda normally and ruku normally. And the person who prays on the chair cannot make ruku or sajda normally, then the ruku should be such that the head goes beyond their knees, like the person who's sitting and making salah. And he should bow down further for his sajda than what he bows for his ruku. That's the only thing that is peculiar to a person that is praying salah on a chair. Otherwise, all the other discussions that we have had is all the same. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, is Ubaydullah asking, if you're making salah alone, must you still read loud? Aloud. No, the sunnah when it's sunnah to recite aloud, whether you are making salah alone or whether you are making in congregation. Now I'm saying. No. Your feet should be similar to the space between your shoulders. No, similar to the space between your shoulders. The lady would be less than that. No. No, doesn't apply. No.
Raising the hand, the further down. So let's say if you come after sitting, stand up. And let's say, for example,
your rakah, what rakah is it for you?
As I was going to ask, for example, you missed the first rakah.
And so your imam's tashahhud is your first rakah. So you're standing up into a second rakah. If you're standing up into a second rakah, you don't raise. As when standing up from your tashahhud into your third rakah. I'll double check that for you. These two questions we're going to have to end. We're running too late. Go for it.
Can you make salah with your eyes?
You can, but it's not preferable. The sunnah is to look at the place when you're making sajda. That is preferred. And if I'm not mistaken, there were some scholars that considered it makruh to perform salah with closed eyes. Your place of sajda is your head going to go. Now, you always have a wife question. It's sunnah for a woman to pull the iqamah. And I looked into this masala and I found an answer. I can't remember what it is now. What I remember is that she can make the iqamah for her husband. But I'll have to double check and get back to you. I don't want to commit to an answer now. I don't know. Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, there was a delegation that traveled all the way to Medina. From far they traveled to Medina to ask Imam Malik some important questions. When they arrived in Imam Malik's house, he was already retired. So they met the student of Imam Malik. They said, these are the questions. Can you take it to Imam Malik? Can you give us the answer? We need to take it back to our people. So he presented to Imam Malik about 10 plus questions. For 70% of the questions, Imam Malik said, La adri, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know. So the student said to Imam Malik, Ya Imam, these people, they came from so far to the Imam of Medina al-Munawwara to get answers to these questions. And you're saying, La adri, I don't know. So Imam Malik said, go to them and tell them that Imam Malik doesn't know. And that's an important dars for us. Sometimes we feel like we must have the answer for every question. And it will do us more good sometimes just to say, I don't know. Ta'allam, the poet said, Ta'allam la adri. Wa la tata'allam. And learn how to say, I don't know. And don't learn how to say, I know. Because if you say, I don't know, they will teach you until you know. And if you say, I know, they will ask you until you don't know. Allah grant us tawfiq. The sunnah with which we beautify our salah for Allah, we complete in our class next week, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. May Allah accept our prayer and our salah, and may you allow our salahs to be adorned with the sunnah and the way of the Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The books are still for sale. What's the price again? 30 rands, the book that we are covering for those that don't have copies. We're going to call that down and pray Isha again. I'm very sorry that we're going so late. I'll make a concerted effort to end earlier next week, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. وإذا مؤذن بسم الله. Yeah, make inside his bit.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله